Hi, I'm Tristan Miller, and this is Positive and Negative, a podcast about the intersectionality between mental health and the arts. In this episode, I speak with actor, comedian, writer, and musician Rivkah Reyes about their experience with bipolar disorder and addiction. This is Rivkah on managing mental health.
Keep it simple is another thing that I would say. People, neurodivergent people and people who live with addiction and alcoholism and all of that fun stuff, we're complicated thinkers. We overcomplicate, we overthink, we overdo, we overanalyze. Keep it simple. What are the facts? Spoiler alert, it's probably not your feelings, but your feelings are highly valid. It's just that they can't always be trusted if you have a squiggly brain.
This podcast is made possible by my Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/TristanJMiller for a lot of different kinds of content, but also early releases of uncut episodes of this podcast. You can also check out my tour dates at tristanjmiller.com/manicimpressive. I hope you enjoy listening to Rivkah as much as I enjoyed speaking with them. Were you born in Chicago? I know you were there for a little bit.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Chicago. I very much consider Chicago to be my hometown and not my home. But I was, born and raised in Chicago, went and worked in New York when I was a kid, and then came back to Chicago, stayed in Chicago until I was 25, until 2017. And moved out to LA for work, and then I would always kind of go back to Chicago after gigs. So I would go do a show in LA and come back to Chicago, or I'd go do a show in New York and then come back to Chicago, Indiana randomly, New Orleans, come back to Chicago. And then in the Utah shoot, which was it was my first time being in Utah for longer than a layover, and it was interesting.
I imagine. And do you consider yourself a Midwesterner still, though? Do you have that sensibility?
Yes, I do. I think I do. I feel like Chicago, I always am well, it's Chicago, it's different, but then I'm constantly apologizing for my existence. Anytime I go to a restaurant, it's I am sorry that I'm there.
Sorry for breathing.
Sorry. And then, I feel like Chicago city kids, like myself, we do have a bit of an edge that is different, especially if you went to public school in Chicago. You're kind of more scrappy, but the Midwest is the Midwest. So
When did you start doing stand-up? I was going through your website, and I was oh really, that's fantastic. I started when I had just finished college, and I don't say graduated because I did not graduate. I kind of just finished my theater credits and was I think I'm done. I spent 4 years here, so technically I graduated by proxy. I did get to walk at the graduation ceremony. I just never finished my gen eds. But I started right out of college, and I started doing these my background in comedy started in improv and sketch at Second City. I had done their musical improv conservatory, which spawned this collective called Mint, which stood for Music Improv Night. And we would do these weekly shows where it was 4 musical improv teams with 4 different coaches and 4 different musical directors, and we would each get a 15-minute set. It was a very drunk, debaucherous thing, and I was doing a lot of musical improv and then musical sketch as well. I was in a musical sketch group called Cupid Has a Heart On, R.I.P. That group was so toxic, and its director itself, it was a rough, very dark time. And when I was experiencing what was the beginning of, I think, my emotional and physical rock bottom, with alcohol and drugs, and was being kind of known as this drunk nightmare
slut, like in the Chicago improv and sketch scene, and like not really being welcomed to like play with certain people. I was like, well, fine, I'll do stand up because everyone's a drunk slut in stand up.
As a comedian, I can confirm.
So I felt more welcomed there because I was just like, well, first of all, these people are going to help enable me to continue to act the way I am because I'm very comfortable with the way I am in that moment. Didn't realize I was like completely bottoming out and just causing terror to everyone around me. And I started doing stand-up and musical comedy, kind of in the same vein as, Garfunkel and Oates, Bo Burnham, and stuff. I would always bring in my guitar to sets and do these quick little, 2 songs or 3 song stand-up sets with like bits in between. And so, yeah, I really actually did feel like I found my comedic voice most through stand-up. Like, especially in Chicago, there's like this very broad and beautiful alt comedy scene where it's like people who do PowerPoints, people who do variety acts, like people who do musical comedy, people who do like character like Megan Stalter and Caleb Kieran and all of the greats that now are out here and over there in New York too, like they're all more like from the alt comedy scene, and I felt really welcomed into that as like a musical comedian because like I know in LA like there's a place for musical comedy and it's not most places in LA.
When did you start playing music? Was that always there?
Yeah, it was always there. It was kind of predetermined by my parents that I would be a musician. Like my mom and dad enrolled me in music lessons when I was 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I've been at it almost for 3 decades. It's crazy to think about. I started playing classical guitar when I was 4, and singing, I picked that up while I was on set on my first gig, which was famously School of Rock. I said that and I rolled my eyes. I don't mean it. I don't mean it when I roll my eyes. I just got out of a relationship with somebody who critiqued me on the fact that I roll my eyes a lot. And I was just like, I promise you, it's like not personal. I think it's just like a thing that I always do.
Yeah, it's to downplay it because it's a well-known thing, right?
Yeah.
And I get it.
Definitely to downplay it.
Yeah, I understand. But so you started singing there then on set, and you hadn't taken lessons before?
I hadn't taken lessons. I didn't like sing really in the movie, but we would do between like takes or like between like during lunch we would have little karaoke parties.
That's adorable.
It was so, we played DDR and do little karaoke parties. We would also, like, we had, like, a big karaoke party with all the cast and crew for, like, I think it was, like, when we started shooting. Because we had, like, a month and a half of rehearsal before and table reads and stuff. And then we started shooting, and I think that, like, first weekend of shooting, we had a big karaoke party. And then to wrap, we also had a karaoke party. Oh. And I became super invested in musical theater because we were shooting out in New York. And we would, like, on our nights off, we would go see Broadway shows. Like, we saw Lion King, we saw Aida, we saw The Producers, a couple others, and I just became so infatuated with Broadway, and also the movie Chicago came out, and I was like, what? Like, oh my God, I have arrived, and this is what I want to do. And, just also the other thing was that all of the kids, we all had very differing tastes in music that all kind of just like blended together, and we would like go to like Tower Records on the weekends or whatever, Coconuts or whatever, and like pick up CDs and stuff and bring them to set the next day and be like, oh my God, I got this from the store, like goodness, you should listen to this, like this is, have you heard of this Avril Lavigne? Like we were obsessed with, the girls were all obsessed with Avril Lavigne.
Of course.
The boys, Kevin, who played Freddie Jones in the movie, he introduced me to pop punk, like with Green Day, Blink-182, and also like punk, like Minor Threat, Black Flag and stuff. And I was just like, wow, like, this has just expanded my taste in music, because I had really only known classical and then classic rock. like Beatles, Rolling Stones. And then my dad also had this Motown like soul collection that he would play. And then I think aside from that, I knew a couple of like movie musicals, like Sound of Music and Grease. But like I had a pretty vast music taste as a kid, and it became even more vast when we all kind of showed each other what we were into. You know, and also it's so funny thinking about this now. I've always been a little bit spiritual. I grew up in the Catholic Church and also with a Jewish dad, but like I've always had rituals. And when I was a kid, like especially when I was on set and we were like living in this hotel, my morning ritual was I would wake up and I'd put on MTV or VH1 and watch like the music videos and just study essentially. And also like I feel like I connect to my guides like through music the most. And I just remember having my like first like big telltale like queer awakening, seeing the Tattoo music video, All the Things She Said. You know that song, right? All the things she said, running through my head. It's the girls making out.
Yeah.
That was like my, oh my God, wait, what?
Yeah. Sure.
And then like shortly after the Britney Madonna moment, and I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think like more than like watching Britney and Madonna kiss, it was seeing how mad Justin Timberlake was. That was the queer awakening for me, because I was just like, I kind of know that's camp. I don't know what camp is yet, but I kind of know that's camp.
Absolutely. So when you say you've always been spiritual, what do you mean by that?
I've always had these little rituals.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, religion is very rigid and solid, and spirituality is very fluid and roomy and broad. And you can really, you know, if you wake up at the same time and like pour yourself a glass of water and like think about the 24 hours ahead at the same time every day, that is like a spiritual routine for yourself. If that's, you know, if you're going into it with that intention. And I always found that, like, especially when I was first immersed in classical guitar, it was this thing that I would go to feel good, and feel this sense of like peace and ease, which is like what I do now with like meditation or breath work or yoga or whatever, like, you know, tarot cards and all of that. And while I was never really down with like the religious aspect of my, you know, upbringing, I understood kind of like, oh, these people are coming here to get this solution to whatever it is they're going through. I think I just kind of have always been a little bit claircognizant and like just knowing shit, like, and highly sensitive, highly intuitive kid. Like, could never explain this, but I would always know when something was going to like go wrong. And that was like diagnosed as anxiety, but I was just like, no, I think that's just like intuition. And
it's a fine line.
There's a very fine line, right? I recently heard somebody say that ADHD is intuition overload.
Ooh,
and I was just like
that.
Whoa, I really like that. That feels very, very relatable. Yeah, but I always had this sense of like believing in magic, believing in miracles, and believing in like trusting my gut.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you've already kind of started to touch on it, but do you ever get concerned that those feelings aren't necessarily like true because of the mental health disorder situation?
Definitely. I mean, as like a, you know, bipolar, anxious, depressed, like neurodivergent alcoholic in recovery, you know, a lot of my thoughts are not coming from the universe. Like, a lot of those are coming from self-will, selfishness, dishonesty, and self-pity. So now that, you know, I've known my diagnoses, like, for coming up on 4 years, and like now that I've been actively working on my mental health and my sobriety for nearly 4 years, I feel like it becomes this like working part of my mind, but it wasn't always that easy. Like now I can definitely suss out like whether something is like a Rivkah like crazy thought, not crazy, but like, you know, like an unwell thought, a sick thought, or like an ill-motived thought, or
ill-intended.
whether it is, yes, there you go, or like if this is actually coming from a place of like honesty, purity, and love, like, and trust and faith and all of those fun, you know, spiritual qualities that I hope to be. Humility. That's the one I always forget.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Oh, you couldn't have written a better setup. And what are the practices that have allowed you to like feel that sense of clarity now? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of meditation and prayer. And a lot of people balk at the idea of prayer. I'm not like physically getting down on my knees or anything like that. Like sometimes I do if I'm desperate as fuck, but like literally, like I will be, I do skincare. I'm like very, very into my whole 12-step skincare routine. I like, as I am putting the cleanser on my face, I'm, you know, breathing in light and exhaling.
You're cleansing
that
your
which
soul
does not
too.
serve me, cleansing my skin, cleansing my soul, right? Letting the outside lead or whatever. You know, and though I'm completely aware that like skincare and Botox and all that stuff, like that doesn't fix the inside problem, can't fix an inside problem with an outside solution, but like there are some things that just make me feel good. I you know, there are these acts of like protection from myself, essentially, like skincare, like going for a run, or, well, let me get right sized, going for a walk uphill. And I live in a neighborhood with a lot of hills and like secret staircases and stuff, and you know, I know that I feel a lot better in my day and feel like less prone to taking things personally, to being selfish and self-seeking if I do take those daily actions or those little rituals. Like I said, you know, I don't like necessarily spring for music videos first thing in the morning anymore like I did when I was little, or nor do I like pick up my guitar. That was the other thing. Like, you know, I would pick up my guitar to practice every morning, like right when I woke up before school. After school, I would play a little bit, and then right before bed, I would play a song or two. That was my little thing, 3 times a day. And now I have this morning routine, this midday check-in, and this nighttime routine that are crucial, and they change at least once a week. Like I change it up because I move very quickly. In human design, I'm a manifesting generator, which means like rituals have to be changing and like evolving as I change and evolve. Because I get bored super quickly with certain rituals. So, yeah, with my like prayer and meditation routine, like it doesn't always look like me sitting in silence for 20 minutes. Sometimes it's like I'll wake up and I'll like journal for, you know, 3 pages, artist way style, like morning pages, stream of consciousness, or I'll write a little to-do list, or I'll pull a tarot card and look at it and reflect on, okay, what does this card make me feel? What is my gut reaction to this card? How am I going to embody the Two of Wands for the day? Like, you know, and then like, or writing down like any of the dreams that I had that I can remember. And then midday checking in to see if any of the little symbols or motifs in my dreams came true or came up in XYZ at work or in a conversation with, you know, a friend or a crush or whatever. And then at night before I go to bed, I do this pretty much every night. I kind of check in and ask myself, okay, where did I self-sabotage today? Let's be real. Let's be honest. Like how much time did I spend thinking about money in an unhealthy, toxic way today? How much time and energy did I burn up checking the Instagram likes today? You know, and just giving myself that little like inventory at the end of the day, just to really be like, okay, what can we work on tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Without being super fucking hard on myself. Oh, did I forget to eat today? Like, let's not do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Which came first, the sobriety or the diagnosis?
Well, it's complicated. I
Okay.
consider sobriety to be like you don't drink, you don't do drugs, you don't use weed.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you are on any sort of medication, it's prescribed to you by a medical professional.
Yeah.
I didn't have that until January of 2019 because I was still on the marijuana maintenance regimen where I wasn't drinking, I wasn't doing coke, I wasn't stealing people's Xanax except for once in the first year that I wasn't drinking and doing coke. But I was still like using weed alcoholically. But I took my first honest stab at like complete and utter abstinence from alcohol and coke, which are my main like drugs of choice, in December of 2017, like shortly after I moved to LA. Hearing this girl in the makeup chair say, "Oh yeah, I don't really drink because it shows up on camera," and then me being like, "I have to stop drinking."
It was vanity.
Yes, vanity. You know, that's why do you think I forgot humility?
Yeah, yeah.
It's always humility is the first thing to go out the door, and then honesty second. But like, I took my first honest stab at that in December of 2017. I haven't picked up a drink since December 10th of 2017, and I haven't done coke since then either. And like the first 90 days of my sobriety, I was a complete and utter fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
Of course, because I was in withdrawal.
Yeah.
From like alcohol, cocaine, and benzos, like, which is insane to put yourself through that. I was also a huge Klonopin addict when I was in college. Like, I manipulated my doctor into prescribing it to me for my anxiety, which was like, yes, I knew I was like struggling with anxiety and like trigger warning suicidal ideation and stuff, but like, I knew that Klonopin was gonna put me the fuck out. And that's what I wanted. So, you know, and like going to like my PCP versus going to a fucking psychiatrist for that is highly manipulative.
Yeah.
Calling myself out. See, honesty. But no, I was in withdrawal, and I was going through a bit of like an identity, like existential crisis with like my dating situations. I had been like actively participating in sex work, which I don't think objectionably is bad, but for me it did not, like it wasn't good. None of it was ever from a place of like empowerment. It was all just from a place of desperation and needing money to like buy either drugs or afford my apartment in LA. And I was spiraling out so hard that I had started having panic attacks every day and knew that I couldn't go back on Klonopin because I was actively trying to be sober.
Yeah.
And went to the hospital, to Cedars-Sinai, and was just like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, and they brought in like a psychiatrist to give me an evaluation. They brought in a social worker, and they went into the other room after like talking to me for a bit. And I got this email from my agent saying that I had booked something. And I started crying tears of joy and like was just like, this is amazing. All my problems are fixed. Like, I feel fucking great. And then comically, like, brilliant, the social worker and the psychiatrist come back in and they're like, we think you like are possibly bipolar. And I was just like crying tears of joy. I'm like, that makes sense. Like, but yeah, so then shortly after that came the honest try and like starting to seek spiritual help for the spiritual problem that was my drug addiction and alcoholism. Where before it was just like dry drunk, which is basically, for the listeners who don't maybe know what that means, is like you're not actively drinking or using drugs, but you're still acting like a fucking crazy alcoholic.
Yeah.
You know, just because the physical thing is removed doesn't mean you're like in action that like is supporting your recovery.
Yeah, sometimes you can just have a bad personality despite not being drunk, you know, for a little bit.
Yeah. Ooh,
You know?
I relate.
Yeah,
I relate to that. Sometimes I'm still like, do I just have like a medically bad personality?
Yeah, I think, you know. So it was a combination, though, of both of those things.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things were going down around that
Yeah.
time, between like December 2017. I mean, well, honestly, February 2017, I hit like what I consider to be like the big physical rock bottom,
Yeah.
where like, you know, trigger warning, I was like assaulted while blacked out, and
Oh my
I was
gosh.
just like, yeah, I was just like, I have a drinking problem, like clearly, like, yes, fuck the person that did that to me, and like that I don't have a part in that, like that's not something that I did to myself.
Yeah.
Like, and but it absolutely could have been avoided. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know for myself that that situation could have been avoided. Still fuck that person, and still that person is
course.
very sick, but like, you know, I knew that something wasn't right with the way that I drunk and the way that I used drugs. So I talked to a friend who I knew was sober and was like, I really wanted to get sober. They were like, okay, then don't drink tomorrow. And I was just like, okay, I won't. And I didn't drink. And I didn't drink for maybe a week after that incident happened. And then something fucking triggered me and I drank again, you know, and I started to see the bargaining that I do, like, you know, the ways that I try to control my drinking and using. I started keeping a spreadsheet of like how many times a week I would black out, which was a lot. And then I would only do, I worked at a brewery at the time because of course I did. And I used the like guise of, I just really like craft beer. I'm really interested in
Yeah.
the whole process of how it's made and da-da-da. But I was definitely like,
Yeah.
you know, free beer all the time,
Yeah.
flowing by the pound. And I, instead of getting like a full size pint after my shift, I would just do little shot sized amounts
Yeah.
of beer. But then I would like drink 12 of those
Sure.
rather than one or none, which is what was, you know, there's a saying like, you know, 1,000 is not enough and one is too many
Yeah.
for me. Like that is definitely how my drinking and drug use is. And like from like that point from February 2017, when the incident happened, to when I did, you know, have my last drink, there was just a lot of experimentation.
Yeah.
And a lot of bad shit happened. A lot of like, you know, me going through toxic narcissistic abuse in relationships, a lot of me cheating or being cheated on, spiraling, you know, really falling apart. And then this gig that brought me out to LA kind of saved my life because I met so many sober people in my first 2 months living in LA that I was just like, wow, fucking everybody here is sober. I guess I should be too. Because A, it shows up on camera, and B, I don't want to like be coming into auditions like this. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't want to be coming onto set or into production hungover anymore. I just can't. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I just, you know, had my last drink, and then, you know, for the 3 months of Sobriety, where I was like not drinking, not using the harder stuff, I was still in these toxic relationships. I was still behaving so selfishly. I was still, you know, now that the alcohol and the drugs were gone, I was like using anything else I could, like sex or food or lack thereof, or, you know, shopping,
Yeah.
whatever, to numb out and to fill that like giant void that I felt in my soul. And then I just knew that like it was like more of a spiritual thing than anything,
Yeah.
and I needed to seek spiritual help for this spiritual problem.
Okay. That's interesting. I think that's a very unique perspective on it, because so often addiction is treated as a disease these days, which is effective. But I think it's really wonderful that you were able to recognize the other aspect of it, which is for you spiritual. And I think, you know, I have a bit of that too. And I think that that's a component of it, in as much as like you can't separate a person's brain from their mind and their soul, you know, and it's all one chain. So
it is a big, you know, they say that alcoholism and addiction is a 3-part disease. It's a physical thing, it's also a mental thing, and it's also a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and like, you know, some even say that it's a physical allergy to alcohol.
Yeah.
And
I've heard that.
like, I mean, my allergic reaction to alcohol and drugs is that I fucking go berserk on everybody, and I cannot keep it down. I just can't handle my shit when I'm drunk. And like, my dad always, you know, my dad's also, you know, dabbled in and out of sobriety for many years, and like, his joke is like, yeah, I'm allergic to tequila because every time I drink it, I break out in handcuffs. And I'm like, okay, no, fucking yucca.
Yes.
We love the dad jokes.
Yeah. How did all this start for you? It was early, right? That all the drugs.
Mental health stuff?
Yeah,
the drugs.
The drugs, the mental health stuff. And was the mental health stuff like apparent as a child as well, do you think?
Yes. I was highly obsessive as a kid. My whole family has addictive personalities. Like, you know, there's lots of drug addicts on, you know, both sides. There's lots of mental health stuff on both sides. A lot of untreated and unaddressed mental health stuff on my mom's side. Because, you know, for a lot of POC, like, there's a lot of just unaddressed mental illness because either doctors are minimizing the pain, or the family is like, you know, you're not depressed. Go do your homework, or go take a walk. You'll feel better. Go splash water on your face. You'll feel better. And like, you know, mental health and mental illness stuff was always a big hush hush thing in my family. It was like, my auntie has schizophrenia, and and you know, she's treated for it, and she's on medication for it, but there was an incident, you know, where she tried to kill herself when I was a kid, and it was this big family secret. Nobody could talk about my auntie. Like, you know, almost was as if she didn't exist. Like, is how it was treated. And you know, my dad's brother, major junkie, like, you know, and you know, his tactic was to like use that to scare us out of doing drugs. And like, it worked for a while, but like, I mean, obviously, look where I am. Like, I ended up still doing a lot of drugs. It started, the alcohol, I mean, my first drink was when I was 11. I was at the Toronto Film Festival. I snuck a little champagne, and it, I always tell this story, like, in sobriety spaces, like, when I held it in my hand, literally the room around me kind of stopped. And I was just like, this is the elixir of life.
Yeah.
I had tasted it before on New Year's one year. My you know, I was at like a family event function, and like, I had thought that my little Welch's sparkling cider was like in front of me, and it was like my, you know, auntie or uncle's, somebody's like backwash champagne left over in the flute, and I had drank it. I was like, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But like, that's it. And then knowing like that champagne had been like on TV as this thing that fancy people drank, and like, you know, it was like a wedding or like a special event or a bat mitzvah, like, there's the champagne, you know. And I was at a fancy Hollywood, or well, Toronto Film Festival event, and was like, well, I'm a fancy person now, so I get to have this. And also, when I picked up the glass and it was a secret, the room stopped, and I was just like, this is gold. This is this elixir that is going to make me cool, that's going to help me to be able to interact with people in a less nervous way. And I like took it and poured it into a cup that was previously used for Sprite, and, you know, was just walking around at the party fucking sipping on my little champagne, and had this like cool little secret, and I felt like it instantly put this like filter on life. And then I didn't touch it for a while, like, I mean, not until I was in high school again, really. And that was when like my friends were starting to like, sneak vodka into Snapple bottles and stuff. And I kind of really wanted to do it just to impress my friends and to be cool. And, but it was really the people, like the validation that was more of the drug for me. Probably like as early as 4th grade, maybe earlier even. Like, I think I talk about this a lot in my writing. Like, when your parents put so much pressure on you to be a star and tell you that before you were born, they decided that I was going to be a star. They picked my name because it had star quality. They put me in guitar because they saw the star quality. Granted, I wanted to be a guitarist. I wanted to be a musician. And then when I did School of Rock, I wanted to be on camera. Like, I knew that was a thing for me that I wanted to do. But coming back to school after that, all I wanted was to be liked, and I was very not. It was either like, extreme jealousy and like bullying, or like, can you get me this, kind of treatment of like, oh, now that you're rich and famous, like, can you introduce me to Jack Black or randomly like Shia LaBeouf? Like, I'm like, I don't even know him like that. Like, he wasn't in the movie with me. Shit. Like, but it and that like really messed me up. I let it mess me up. Well past adulthood, well into adulthood, I should say. And the drugs and the alcohol was just a symptom.
That makes sense. I was going to ask about that. Is that weird being because that's a very popular film, specifically of, people our age. Was that weird going back to, I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to hear more about it. And specifically, like, I would imagine that would harbor a lot of trust issues from people now.
Definitely. Yeah, I found that at first I trusted people a little bit too easily, and then I went in the like complete opposite direction. I live in extremes. I'm either like 100% in or 100% out. And like I super trusted people, and then they would show them their true colors, and I would just withdraw everything and shut down and become this like, emotional basket case of just no feelings. And like, I definitely would get just like knocked the fuck out with breakups, like especially like in high school. I would become extremely obsessive over the people that I liked and had crushes on or dated, and then would need to literally be home for a day after the inevitable heartbreak.
Yeah.
And that is like a telltale sign of like being a love addict, which I am pretty open about too.
Yeah.
But yeah, like coming back to school from School of Rock, or if I was like out for a couple weeks on like press or, doing the traveling aspect and, premieres and award shows and festivals and whatever, coming back was always just like, back to reality.
Sure.
Because when I was with the kids from the cast and the people from the movie, it was like I was with my family. I was with these people that got it, these people that loved me, and did accept me as I was. And we like all had this shared beautiful, beautiful experience of being in School of Rock together. And then we'd all go back to our fucking lives. And my life in Chicago wasn't great. Like, especially when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was always this like brutal like slap in the face of, oh yeah, you're still just like kind of a nobody, and like nobody actually likes you. If they do, it's just because they think you can give them something, and everyone else is either jealous of you to a point where they're bullying you, or they just don't like you at all.
Sure.
I got bullied a lot, and especially like, you know, when School of Rock came out, it was kind of when Zanga, if you remember Zanga, and the IMDb messenger boards and stuff, like people like would, you know, comment on like my performance, or you know, or creepy guys would say creepy shit, like, and it was just a lot of overwhelm. I really was not prepared. I don't think my parents were prepared, and there was no like therapist ready to go, like, because therapy for kids was like only if they had like schizophrenia or like or like, you know, and my sister was diagnosed with ADHD when she was really little, and they put her on drugs, like, which is insane. Like, I mean, I think it's really, really hard the way that, you know, kids who are neurodivergent got treated and probably still get treated. And especially ones that are performers or creatives, like there's a lot to be said for like being a child actor and being in that like high sensation environment, and like being faced with all that pressure and all the like, you know, energy that comes with being a performer on that level. And there was no like counseling in place really until I like was in high school and needed it badly, and you know, even that was like heavily monitored by my parents, and they were like reading my diaries and stuff, and like, you know, finding out about my like sexual endeavors, like, and grounding me, and finding out about me drinking and stuff through reading my diaries, and punishing me rather than asking if I was okay. And asking if I needed help, which, you know, they did the best with what they grew up with, and what tools they had, and their tools were very rusty. So.
Can I ask about the sex work?
Yeah.
Kind of leading from that, did you, when you were in that position, were you worried about your career as a performer as well, and your reputation? Because I would imagine that's hard to balance.
Well, I was mostly engaged in like virtual stuff.
Okay.
Like I knew that I could get people to send me money, to send them content because of who I was.
Yes.
Which is like exploiting myself and objectifying myself in a really, really toxic way, out of desperation. And I started doing it because I wanted drugs and money to, you know, do the drugs. And then I would also like, you know, be on like sugar daddy websites and stuff, and being more anonymous there. And I never like had a situation where somebody recognized me, thank God. But I still to this day, like occasionally will have content leaked. And, you know, luckily my Google alerts are on, and my, you know, I have people on Twitter who will like, they're well-intentioned, but they'll send me like, hey, just so you know, like this picture of you got leaked. And I'm like, okay, don't tell me, just report it whenever you see that. Like, you know, and if you're, you know, listening and you ever do see a picture of me, just know that it wasn't consented, that it was leaked. Like that was, you know, that is like technically illegal. But again, my part in it is like, I willingly gave that away so that I could get my needs met for drugs. And that is like, I was so willing to do anything to get high, including put my career at risk, including, you know, and I think it kind of sucks that like doing sex work puts your career at risk as a performer. Like that's like not cool. And I have a lot of friends who are, you know, in that industry and who are like, always living in that fear. But I think there can exist a world in which like sex work isn't this big stigmatized thing. I just know for myself, it was not the move, and it will never be the move. You know, I even in the last, you know, half year, I had Patreon, And as an offering for like the higher paying tiers, I like had like not nudes, not like porn or anything like that, but like spicier pictures
Yeah,
on there
sure.
that like were protected by a paywall that eventually of course got leaked once I took them off of Patreon, when I decided that that was still a dishonest way of putting my work out there, and that I could, you know, gain financial abundance in healthier ways for me that don't involve objectifying myself. And yeah, like, but I was definitely capitalizing on the fact that I was this, like, you know, adored child star. And a lot of people, like, you know, knowing the way that men interacted with me on the, like, you know, IMDb message boards when I was fucking 10, I was just like, oh, sure. Like, people will definitely buy videos and pictures of XYZ, like, you know, for, and I did, like, I did thrive on that for a little while, but it's like, I think of it as like, you know, using gas, like, you know, is that clean gas? Is that gonna like keep your car engine healthy?
Yeah.
Or like, are you gonna be able to get from point A to point B? Sure. Is it a sustainable way of getting from point A to point B? Is it a healthy and like environmentally friendly way of getting from point A to point B? Like, probably not. And like, what I'm going for now is like most sustainable, most healthy way to get from point A to point B.
That's great. I'm glad that you were able to navigate that and realize that it's not a good fit for you.
Oh no, I like only recently started talking about this too.
Yeah.
Like I'm still like shaking right now talking about it, knowing that there's going to be some negative Nancy out there or some like puritanical Paul out there who like, you know, doesn't like fuck with that and like will probably pass judgment. But at the end of the day, luckily, due to my work on myself, I'm able to be in this position of neutrality around what people think of me.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, then I'll say this. Thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate your openness. That means a lot.
Of course. The thing is also that I've learned, me speaking publicly about it and using my platform to shed light on it, hopefully, my hope is that somebody is like, oh shit, me too. And if like I can survive this, like, so can anyone else.
Yeah.
If they're willing to fucking work on themselves and be radically honest and accepting of the past. You know, right? We talked about like how much time and energy do I want to spend like digging a hole of like, I hate the things that I did in the past and resenting myself for the actions that I took when it got me here. And I'm absolutely like thriving and loving my life now. But, you know, I think seeing my personal like recovery and mental health heroes share publicly about their shit really helps me not feel as alone, and seeing representation for folks who are neurodivergent or, you know, struggle with addiction or have struggled with addiction, like who are fucking surviving and thriving and killing it now. Like, yeah, I probably wouldn't have gotten clean or sober if I hadn't seen accurate, you know, beautiful, like empowered reality and representation of that on my TV screen or my Instagram or whatever. So here I am.
That's beautifully said. Now, when you were crying because you got an acting gig and they said you're probably bipolar, you said, oh, that makes sense. Did you feel a sense of relief with that?
Definitely. I needed a diagnosis. I think that, you know, maybe if I hadn't been in that place that I was at, that low point, I would have seen it as a death sentence.
Yeah.
But also, I have a lot of friends who are bipolar and who are in treatment or, you know, taking actions towards like that level of neutrality that I feel like I, as a bipolar person, want to have and be in, where the high highs aren't as high and the low lows aren't as low. Like, yeah, no, I think having that diagnosis and having that thing to label it as really helped. And there are times where I had a recovery person who was not a psychiatrist say, no, you're not bipolar, you just have a spiritual malady. And I'm like, well, hold on for a second there. I was diagnosed by a medical professional, and we're not to take that lightly or belittle or patronize that. But I definitely feel like having that like label, in place helped me more with like, okay, what action do I have to take to get better?
Yeah.
Not necessarily to feel better, but to get better,
Yeah.
And I was put on, they were like, we won't be able to like really know like what medication you need unless you're like fully sober.
Yeah.
And I got fully sober from everything. And like after, a couple months of that, I was put on, a Lamictal and was on that for like a year. And then I honestly felt like it was numbing me out from being able to express like emotions as an actor. So I'm currently not medicating the bipolar. I medicate my anxiety and I medicate my ADD. But for the bipolar, I'm not taking any like mood stabilizers.
Sure.
But no, I am prescribed a stimulant for my ADD, which I am under like very monitored care from my psychiatrist and from my like recovery people.
Yeah.
And then for the anxiety, I have like an as needed thing that is like for if I have a panic attack,
Yeah. But that's interesting about the stimulant because that often can trigger a manic episode. And how do you go about balancing that? You said you're under like observation, but like how do you have you gotten a sense of like, oh, this is how I feel when I'm about to go Zoom?
Yeah, I do. I have a very yes and no. I mean, right, with mania, sometimes it's triggered by caffeine, other times it's triggered by a life event. And I sometimes can afford to live in the gray area of like, oh, is this about to be, am I about to go into, okay, am I going to have to like be vegan and caffeine free this month? Okay. Sure. And I think it is just like an honest, open conversation between myself, my psychiatrist, and then myself and my higher power, where I have to like be constantly like checking in and seeing where I'm at, like physically, mentally, and spiritually, which I do have, a very good grasp on that. Like I can definitely tell you like, and then tell my therapist, my psychiatrist, my spiritual advisors, like where I am mentally, physically, and spiritually, most days, because I'm constantly taking that mental inventory or that stock of my emotions, my feelings, my fears, my, triggers, my everything. And I think it is just that constant self check-in, which I know is easier said than done. Yeah. But this is like 4 years in the making. Like I will never be recovered from alcoholism. I will never be recovered from having been diagnosed bipolar. But I will always be actively taking measures, both, spiritual and medical and mental and physical and psychological measures, like to push myself closer to that state of neutrality and that state of serenity.
Mm-hmm. You're pretty open about not being straight.
Famously, I'm gay.
Yeah, like notable queer person. But when did it really sink in? And specifically in terms of gender, when did you click into place?
Gender-wise, it's still a thing. It's still like a work in progress. Like I oscillate between being like I am they them only, or being like today where I'm like they she, like any mistakes made without malice, like I'm good. Yeah. And I feel very secure right now in my gender identity. I identify as gender fluid, non-binary. Mm-hmm. I also still identify as a woman though. So like there's it's broad, it's roomy, it's inclusive. I'm not in a place where I want to say physically transition or anything like that, but I'm not closed off to it. if one day I wake up and I'm like, no, I think I do want to go on T, or I do want to get top surgery, like that's an outcome that I am not, shut off to. I can earnestly say I don't see that for me, like in this moment. But again, I can't be really thinking past the 24 hours that are ahead of me. And like, no, I feel like the first time I questioned my own gender or lack thereof was when I met a person who was non-binary for the first time and like was in like shared space with them. We were working on a play together, and I saw a lot of myself in their like style and their like way of, talking about themselves. And I was just like, I wonder if I'm maybe a little on the like trans non-binary spectrum. And then I like, started saying like they and she is fine. This was in 2015. And there again, like I've fluctuated between like being like I'm they them only, or they she, or she they, like or just she. I've definitely gone back into the closet as cis and then come back out. Same thing with like my queerness. Like I've never once I came out as queer, gay on that LGBT like vibe. Well, once I came out as bi, which was what I came out as first. Before I had sex with a girl, I like haven't gone back to being like I'm straight because that's just I know that I'm not. But I was I came out as a lesbian when I was in college, and then I started dating a boy again, and I was just like, maybe I am bi. And then what I realized, like, very, very recently, like, I'm talking, like, last summer, was that I have been, like, compulsory hetero for my whole life.
Sure.
And that, no, I am capital G, like, capital L. Like, I am the L word. And proud of that. Like, and just today I was talking with a person, this girl, and writing up an email, like, to pitch myself for something, and I used the term gender fluid, or I think I said I'm a non-binary lesbian, and she was just like, can you be non-binary and a lesbian? And I was like, well, I am. So yeah, I mean, the sexuality thing I'm very, very secure in. The gender thing, today I'm very secure in it.
Sure. Like
maybe tomorrow I won't be, but it's just an ever expanding thing. Sure, there will be like 6 new genders released next week.
It feels like you had this openness, and then you were forced to close it, and then now it feels like you're opening up again, and that's really beautiful to see.
Yeah, I think like every day that I work towards my recovery and towards my spiritual, awakenings, plural, and like towards that self-actualization and that self-love, and recommit every day to self-love, and I don't say that term lightly. Like I don't like, think that like, self-love is the cure to all illness. Like, but I do have to like love myself into loving other people. Whereas like I used to just be like, other people need to love me so that I know how lovable I am. But every day that I like wake up and recommit, I mean, to all that, I'm closer and closer to like that, to thine own self be true, like to knowing who the fuck I am, knowing who the fuck I want to be, knowing who the fuck I want to be with. And it's just this beautiful thing. I really think it's like every morning my first thought is like, oh, God damn it, fuck, like shit. And then I'm able to like, okay, grateful to be able to practice my spiritual principles and be humble and be honest and be unselfish and be helpful to other people and to love myself and to be forgiving and like spring into action, and then throughout the day I'm just like, oh fuck again, like, and I constantly restart that process of like, all right, let's get back into the center of the love that we are. So
What would your biggest piece of advice to someone who's facing either a diagnosis of bipolar disorder or sobriety be?
Trust your gut.
Okay. Oh.
Simple.
Yeah, nice
Trust
and
your
easy.
gut.
Nice
And
easy.
also, like, keep it simple is another thing that I would say. Like, you know, people, neurodivergent people and people who live with addiction and alcoholism and all of that fun stuff, we're complicated thinkers. We overcomplicate, we overthink, we overdo, we overanalyze. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
What are the facts? What are the fucking facts? Spoiler alert, it's probably not your feelings, but your feelings are highly valid.
Yeah.
It's just that they can't always be trusted if you have a squiggly brain, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that a lot because I'll speak to people who aren't neurodivergent and they'll be like, I just feel bad today. I'm in a bad mood. And it'll be that easy for them. And I'm like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, is this the beginning of an episode? Did something happen? Whereas most people are just like, I'm tired. And I was like, to live in such bliss.
How do you do that? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And
But also, you don't know if they're actually neurotypical or not. Like, you
that's
know,
true,
I feel like it's actually very, you know, very uncommon
Yeah,
for people to be neurotypical or not addicted to something. Like, you know.
And it's also by whose stick are we measuring what is
There you go.
neurotypical.
What's the barometer?
Yeah. So, like, no one is because there isn't there's no control group for sanity.
Right.
You know?
Right.
How do you prove that? But
And also, like, how boring. How boring to be sane.
Yeah.
How boring to be sane.
I think there's absolutely something to that. It is like if you can get past a lot of the dark parts of it, it is a beautiful thing to have such a unique perspective on life.
For real.
You know, if you get to a point where you're feeling like you can, like you were saying, cruise on clean gas. You know? But yeah.
Yeah.
But this has been absolutely lovely speaking with you. Unless there's anything else you want to say right now, I have everything I need from you.
I think I have everything I need and more. It's written all over your face. Baby, I can see your halo.
No.
You know you're my saving grace. Well, it's like to finish with a little Beyonce, you know?
Yeah. Live a little. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.